We're looking at coronavirus through the eyes of Jesus. 1.5 million people as of today have contracted the virus. And we're looking at how does Jesus react to sickness and mourning and death. And we've looked at that Jesus has compassion, that Jesus is angry, that death exists, that mourning exists, that suffering exists. And today I want to look at the very end of Jesus' life in Luke chapter 23, where we see Jesus on the cross. You see, Jesus also suffered. Jesus can relate to us when we suffer. Let's not forget that. Jesus can relate to us. He's experienced suffering just like we have. And so we can call out to him, knowing that he understands us. And so at the very end, Jesus is on the cross, and Luke chapter 23, verse 44 says, it was about noon, and darkness fell across the whole land for 3 hours. Jesus is suffering. The light from the sun was gone, and suddenly the curtain in the sanctuary of the temple was torn down the middle. And then Jesus shouts out, these are his last words. He shouts out, "Father, I entrust my spirit into your hands." And with those words, Jesus breathed his last words on earth as he's suffering and about to die. He says, "I entrust myself to you, Father." We saw the same thing in the Garden of Gethsemane. Not my will, but yours be done. And so in the midst of suffering and difficulty, Jesus doesn't turn his back on God. Jesus doesn't say, "I don't believe that you exist," which is what I've been hearing over and over again during these times of suffering through the virus. There must not be a God. He must not care. No, Jesus doesn't turn his back on God. He entrusts himself to God, knowing that God has a bigger purpose and a bigger plan than what we can see. Who would have guessed when Jesus died that that would be called Good Friday, which is 2 days from now, from the time that I'm taping this. Good Friday, because Jesus died and provided a way for us to go to heaven. The death of Jesus turned into a good thing because he paid the price of our sins so that we can now know God personally and we can find life through him. I don't know what the coronavirus is going to do in the world. I don't know how God is going to use this for good. But I know that God can take bad things and flip them over and make them good. Just like Jesus' death turned out to be a good thing. We're already seeing some good things come out of coronavirus. I've talked to my neighbors more in the last 2 weeks than I have in the last 10 years, some of them. My church had 1,200 people attend the last time we met together. 2 weeks ago, 14,000 people, tenfold increase, watched our church service online. In Spain, where I used to be a missionary, people are calling the church, reaching out online, and asking about God and who God is. I'm not saying coronavirus is good. It's creating a tremendous amount of suffering. But in the midst of suffering, God has a way of turning things around and bringing good in the midst of suffering. So just as Jesus entrusted his spirit to God, that's what I need to do. That's what we need to do in these times of difficulty. Father, I entrust my spirit into your hands in the midst of coronavirus.